In this video, we're going to take a look at a new feature added in MagicQ v1941 onwards, which is customizable speed masters. You've now got 100 of them available as part of MagicQ. Previously, we had group masters, which were based on groups and obviously the contents of group, where we could do things like size, etc. from them. And we had other ways of just tapping to time things that were active. Speed masters bring all of this together and more. So let's dive in and have a look at the software. So first off, in our playback window, you have a new view in the playback window called View Speed Masters. And this will show you the status of your 100 speed masters that you've got available to you in MagicQ now. So it will show you if they're active, it will show you their current BPM, it will show you what the timing is, what the attributes they'll apply to, and we can also have the things like the fader going to 200%, so doubling our speed that our master is set at. So how do these work? So in terms of recording cues, on my playback one here, as you can see in the visualizer, I've just got a simple effect, a circle effect running on my spots. Now my speed masters can either apply to the individual effects inside of any cue, or they can apply on a playback basis or a cue stack basis. So over here that I made earlier, I've got 3 speed masters, master 1, 2 and 3, recorded to playbacks 8, 9 and 10. Now if I just take an empty cue, so I've got no fixtures selected, and I record that, say, to playback number 6, and I press 3 times my select button, under the function tab you've got a new option here called Cue Stack is a Speed Master. And if I double tap it, it allows me to choose between my 100 speed masters. And if you scroll down, you'll find Speedmaster 100 there. So I've already used Speedmaster 1, 2 and 3, so I'm going to set this one as Speedmaster 4. You can see as soon as I've done that, it's changed the legending around this cue stack. Of course, I can, or this playback, I can label this up. So I'm just going to call that Master 4. And you can see its current BPM, which is nothing because nothing's been set for it yet. And you can see its status, it's active. Now it changes when you set any of your playbacks to be masters, changes the function of obviously the go, stop, fader and flash key. So the flash button becomes the tap to time for that master. So I can now tap in a time and you can see the BPM shown real time on the playback legend there. My go and stop button, the stop button becomes a halt, so it would stop any effects running that are synced to that master, and the go button restarts. So how would I set a playback to listen to that master? By default, all playbacks will listen to Speedmaster 1 by default. So if I go into playback 1 and go into its options and go along my tab settings, I'll find here this option for Speedmaster under advanced. And I can see here playback 1 is set to Speedmaster 1. Now obviously if you don't have a Speedmaster active, the effect will just take the timing as it's set in the cue. So if you don't want to use Speedmasters, fine, you don't need to use them. I'm now going to set Speedmaster 4 onto playback 1, and you can see straight away the effect timing has changed. If I hit my pause key, would stop it. If I hit the play button, would restart. On playback 2, I've got a tilt effect running on my spot, on my washers on the floor, and if I go into the settings here, I can change that to listen to Speedmaster 4 as well. And if I hit the pause key, of course would stop it and restart. If I hit my tap to time button, I can tap in a new BPM and it would sync up to that. You also have other functions for the go and pause buttons. If you hold your shift key down and press play, doubles the speed. So I've still got the same BPM, I'm just running it 2 times. Hit shift and pause, will then step back again. And if I keep hitting shift and pause, we'll half, divide by 4 or divide by 8 on my BPM that I've set here. And again, pressing the play button to step up through again. Of course, the fader is my rate master fader. So as I bring the fader down and stop, would stop any effects running that are listening to that speed master. We can also set it per effect as well. So if I release these 2 playbacks here, and here's one I made earlier, I've got on this playback 4 here, I've got both a dimmer chase and also I've got myself the circle effect on the spots as well. Now by default, if I click it, it's going to be listening to Speedmaster number 1, and that would affect both of the effects. However, if I go into the cue, so I click QID1, View Cue, View Effects, you've got, if you scroll over to the right, some new settings here for Speedmaster. And the default Speedmaster is for it to listen to your Q stack settings, hence why it's saying ignore here. I could change this and say actually the circle effect listens to Speedmaster 1 and my dimmer chase listens to Speedmaster number 4. And now in my case here, if I activate my masters and go, I could now bring master 4 down, which you can see has stopped that one there. And if I bring this one down here, we'll stop my dimmer chase here on master 4. So I can restart just the dimmer chase and restart just the movement. So I can set that per individual effect inside a Q as well. As well as that, we've also changed the timing a little bit, and you'll see there's a new timing option here when you're setting it per effect called per step. So previously in MagicQ, the timing was per step. If I took an effect and said my dimmer chase and it was going from a value to another value, as most effects do, or if it's a 3-step effect or 4, etc., as you tap in your time, you're setting the time per step from one value to another. You've got a new option here called per head timing. So now if I had, say I was tapping in a beat, it would go through each head as I'm tapping through the beat now. Now of course if you've got lots of heads selected, if I had 100 different heads selected, each beat would step on to the next head in my effect. So you've got new options there available, so be aware of how these are working. So if I go back and I look at my faders here, I can see obviously I've now set playback 4 with my circle and dimmer chase to 2 different masters. I've got my master set on the playback, which I've already shown you how to use. If you've got multiple effects listening to the same master, we have a shortcut to allow you to resync all effects to that master, and that's by hitting your shift button and hitting the flash key will resync your effects to the master as well. If I go back to my playback window here, you can see in the view Speedmaster's view now, you can see how my masters are running at the moment. So I've got Speedmaster 1 and 4 active. You can see their BPM. You can type in real time a new BPM if you want, and that would override it, and I can hit go on it, and that would start running again. You've got the previous BPM, so it shows you if you're tapping in a time what your previous time was. So a nice status view here. You've also got an attribute filter. So with any of your Speedmaster, you could say this Speedmaster, if I'm just doing it say per Q stack, I can say this Speedmaster is only going to work on position effects, or it's only going to work on intensity effects. Or you've got variations of, okay, I want it to work on intensity and position, but not beam, not color. You've got various different options available. Our default is that your Speedmasters will work on all attributes or any effects, but of course you can filter that down. The other option you've got is faded to 200%. Again, useful if you're using things like intensity effects. So faded to 200%, if I was to set that to yes, now what would happen in Speedmaster 4 is that with my fader at 50% is at normal timing, and allows me to then increase my BPM to double it to what I'd set there originally on it based off that. Okay. And then of course we've got allowing to tap to sync to a beat, and the final setting here is that timing either per head or per step, which you can customize globally between your masters. So again, if you're not doing it per effect, you can go in and change that setting. So say you've got 100 Speedmasters you can use. You can set them per playback, and you can also set them per the effects. And I know what you're going to ask is, what about things that are running in my programmer, particularly for things like executes? So if we go and click on an empty square here and go to assign special, you've got a new option here called Speedmaster. We can pick our Speedmaster. I'm going to pick Speedmaster 4. And you've got the various options. So I could put in just a tap button to tap to time the Speedmaster. You don't have to have Speedmasters on playbacks themselves. You can have them just in the execute window, or you can use things like a tap to time button on the console, or you can use a combination of. You can have it both execute and on playbacks as well. So I can have a tap to time button for Speedmaster 4. I can have a button to enable it or disable if I toggle it off. I've got my halt, my stop. I can do via speed, increase, decrease, or resync all effects inside of listening to that Speedmaster. Or I can set my Speedmasters to listen to my DJ beat. So we have our integration with Pioneer, with Denon and Virtual DJ. With those set up and connected to MagicQ, that sends us, among other information, the BPM of the current active deck, and we can set our Speedmaster to sync to that BPM and use that. We can also use the audio beat, so all of our consoles have audio input on them, and an unlocked MagicQ PC system. You can use your sound card to take audio in, and we can set a Speedmaster to use the BPM of that audio input. And you can use that as a toggle on and off, or can go back to the tap to time, timing, or time you've entered for a Speedmaster as well. If you don't want to enter all of that data in manually, or all of these options here manually, you can just hit all, and that puts in all of the associated settings for a Speedmaster. And of course, if you want some but not all, you can always click and drag and delete the ones you don't want. As of anything inside an execute window, you can drag it and set a region on it. And when you've set your region on there, you can now obviously do things like tap to time. You can see it's real-time updating my Speedmaster 4 there. As I already said, you don't have to have Speedmasters on playbacks. You can have them on both, or you can have either or, doesn't matter. You've got then obviously the options I can set, my decreases, etc. We could toggle it to listen to the DJ beat input, and we can have multiple Speedmasters all listening to the DJ beat input at the same time, or audio input, and toggle those on and off to go back to my tap timing. Now, if I've got things in my execute window, so if I'm running, say, a typical busk show where I've got, say, a group, let's say my spots, if I copy that to my execute window and I take some color palettes, let's just take those 10 color palettes here, copy those there, and then I go assign special and I say all busking, which puts in my timing options. I've got a fader here on playback 7, which is just a dimmer for my spots, and we've covered setting up execute regions for busking in several of our other tutorials already. So if you've not seen this before, take a look on our YouTube channel. You'll find some videos there on how to set this up in a bit more detail. But now I've set this up, of course, I can do things like applying color over time, etc., directly from the window. There's a new option if I go to an empty square under assign special. So I'm just going to go and click, say, this square here, assign special, and you've got a new option under rate parameters for use Speedmaster, and I could pick, say, Speedmaster number 4. And now if I click and drag this entire area here and hit set region, you can see it's now drawn a region or a box around that area. Anything inside that region is now related. And if I go and add an effect, so as part of my execute busking, I can add effects. So I could say set color 1 as, say, blue, set color 2 as magenta, then add that 2 color effect onto the lights. And of course, I've got my usual tap to time button inside the region here, which I just tapped in a time there. Or I could say actually use the timing of Speedmaster number 4. And now I've got Speedmaster 4 up here where I could tap in a new time. And then again, I've got my fader where I can adjust and pull down as well. Or I could actually go and listen to the DJ beat input if I've got that set up. Obviously, I've not got it set up at the moment, so it stops. Or I could do my dividers, etc. There, decrease the timing or increase the timing, or tap in a new time. And if I don't want the effects inside this region to listen to the master anymore, I simply toggle it off and it'll go back into the tap time speed over here. You can have multiple Speedmasters inside a region, but of course the items inside that region will only listen to one master at a time, so you can only be selecting one of those at a time. So that's the execute window. We've also given you some shortcuts for timing of your Speedmasters if you don't want to have, use up your playbacks or use space in the execute window. So if we go to our setup window and we go here, our Stadium consoles have a dedicated tap button. So normally your tap button is a tap to time either selective or the things that are active. We can change our tap to time button to be up to Speedmaster 1 to 15. So I could say the tap to time button becomes our tap button on Stadium consoles. We've also given you other access to these tap buttons, so things like my crossfade button function, so the button under my crossfader, we can have it tap to time for Speedmaster 1, 2 or 3. Now a huge change for Speedmasters is that when you've got any effect listening to a Speedmaster, so it could be either globally on a playback as we looked at already, or the individual effects, when they're listening to a Speedmaster, they will be at that speed when you come to activate that playback. So it doesn't matter that, say, playback 1 isn't active at the moment, which is the spot circle. It's listening to Speedmaster 4. I could tap in a new time for that, and then I can run that, and it's already at that speed. Again, if I release it, and I put a much slower speed in there, so 120 BPM, and activate, it's already at that speed. In the previous way, when you're using tap to time buttons, not using Speedmasters, so if I was just using tap to time active, it would only tap to time the things that are active at that time. So if I go and run another playback, it's going to be at its original speed. It wouldn't have tapped the time. Going back then, if I release masters, so if I release and stop a master, you can either do that via the playback, or you can do it via the playback window. You can disable the master just simply by toggling it off. Any effects will go back to the original time that they were at when you recorded your cue. So it's not updating or overriding any of the times in your cue. It's locking into a Speedmaster until it's not active and it goes back to the cue timing. So that's Speedmasters available in MagicQ V1941 onwards.